how do we go from this to this? Spinal degeneration, that is the topic for this video. And first of all, what is it? Where does it come from? What causes it? And is there anything that we can do to help prevent this from happening and impacting our lives? We're going to answer all those questions in this video. So stay tuned. We're going to have a few sections for this video to go over all of those questions and answer them. So the first question to cover is, what is spinal degeneration? And it'd be helpful to know that it's also known as degenerative disc disease. And so we'll start with normal so we can see the difference between what is a normal spine and what is a spine that has degeneration in it. And so perfect normal is right here. So we can see that the disc is nice and full, and then we've got no spurring happening, no lipping, anything like that on the vertebra themselves. And so this is perfect normal. And we'll typically all start out like this. And so this is perfect normal. Phase 1, there's 3 main phases of degenerative disc disease or spinal degeneration. And phase 1 is right here. So on this one, you can see a difference here in disc height. So the first thing that'll typically happen is we'll have a loss of curve. So we should have normal curvature in our spine. And for the cervical or neck, lumbar or low back, we should have a 43-degree curvature, and we'll see that a little bit clearer on x-ray whenever we go over that. But see, this is phase 1 right here. So the first thing that we'll see is the narrowing of the disc spacing here, and typically accompanied by a loss of curve in that region of the spine. And so what this will do is it'll impair turning and bending and normal movement typically. So we can see at this perfect normal, much higher in disc height, and that adds up a lot when you think about how many vertebrae there are in a spine, typically 24 vertebrae unless you have an anomaly. And so this is the first phase right here. So we'll see that decrease in the disc height there. And then on phase 2 here, so the next progression, we'll start to see spurring. And so you can see it kind of looks a little bit mangled there, and we don't see nearly as much disc height as even we saw in phase 1. And so there's kind of a progressive narrowing here as we go through the phases. And so as that spurring happens, it typically happens on the front first, because the spinal cord and your nerves are exiting right through here. And so we'll typically see spurring happening in the front first. So phase 2, quite a bit more narrowing of the disc space, as well as more spurring happening. And then all the way here at the end is phase 3. So this is where the spurs start to actually grow together, and you can see it looks like a mouth that's actually closing with teeth here. And so those teeth, those spurs start to grow together and start to form one bone instead of 2 separate bones if it's only happening in one joint. But as you might imagine, it's a lot easier to move when you're closer to this end than it is when you're closer to this end here. And so that is the basic 101 of what spinal degeneration is and what it looks like on an actual spine here. And one of the things to think about at the very end here when we get to phase 3 is that once this joint is fused, when those bones are actually grown together, you can no longer move this joint. So what used to be able to move, nice healthy disc, is now fused, and so that is permanent. So there will be no more motion in this joint once those bones are actually fused together. So needless to say, we like to prevent that as often as possible. So here, looking at x-ray, we can see what perfect normal looks like in terms of degeneration. So 43 degrees is the perfect C-shaped curvature, and you can kind of tell that we're looking at a neck here. We've got the jawline and the skull here, but 43 degrees applies to both the neck or cervical spine and the lumbar spine as well. So 43 degrees is the optimal curvature between C2 to C7 here for the cervical spine, because that leaves the optimal space for the discs in between and the nerves as well, for them to exit out and do what they need to do, as well as just for you to have normal range of motion. And so we'll see as we accumulate structural shifts in the spine, and either nothing is done about it, or it's not addressed with the proper frequency to actually take care of it, add 10 years and it'll start looking like this. So we'll go from this blue line, which is that 43-degree curvature, to more like this red line here, which is flattened out. And so the first thing we'll start to see is a loss of curve here, and then less space for the discs to exit out. And so this is what's called phase 1 of the degenerative process, because we've lost that curve, and then typically it's accompanied with a loss of disc height here. And we can see the spacing between the vertebra. And then add another 10 years to that, and then we'll start to get spurs forming. And so those spurs are actually an intelligent thing for the body to do if you're not getting adjusted, because what that's attempting to do is to brace and lock down this area so that the spinal cord doesn't get injured. But when you go to a chiropractor, we can actually interrupt this process and start to create some space and take some pressure off the nervous system so that your body doesn't need to go further down the degenerative pathway. But what we're seeing in phase 2 is more spurring happening. We still have that loss of curve here, so a flat line there, but then spurs start to form here along the vertebra. And then add another 10 years to that, and we'll get to phase 3 here, and on x-ray we'll be able to see those spurs start to grow together here, and then that space for the discs in between the vertebra will become even more narrow here. So needless to say, we like to catch people as early on as possible when it comes to this trajectory, so that we can influence and hopefully prevent this from going any further. So you might be wondering, what can I do about this issue, or how can I find out if I even have this issue? And if it's found, what can we actually do about it to help improve it or prevent it from happening ever in the first place? And so the main thing that I would recommend is see a chiropractor near you that looks for spinal degeneration. So one of the main ways that we'll use to detect this is through x-ray. So we'll be able to see a two-dimensional image of the spine and be able to determine, okay, do we have any spurs forming, how many, in what regions of the spine, and how progressed is it. We'll be able to make a determination of what phase you're actually in, if there is any degeneration happening, or be able to catch it early enough that there's no spur formation happening yet, and we'll be able to address it quicker. And so what we'll do to actually address it is we'll locate where these vertebrae are that have any shifts that might be causing some irritation and issues and stress in that part of the spine. And what we'll do is we'll find where those shifts are in the spine for you specifically, and we'll do a gentle adjustment to relieve that pressure off of the nervous system, and then your body will actually heal at that point. So we can take that pressure off the nervous system, and then the body doesn't need to create degeneration, and it doesn't need to go further down that pathway. So one of the cool benefits of consistent chiropractic care is that we'll be consistently looking for anywhere that we have those shifts or twists in the spine, and we'll be able to adjust and take the pressure off of those points in the spine whenever they occur. And that's why consistency is such a big deal in chiropractic, because we want to consistently be checking for any of these areas that may be developing over time that have twists and turns and shifts in them. And we want to consistently be checking for that and addressing it as it occurs, so that it doesn't lead down the degenerative pathway and create issues further down the line.